place?
Well, there's a Turkish column in front of him, out of Masriel.
A filmmaker who rewired your brain with Memento, made you question gravity in Interstellar, and somehow convinced an entire generation that a 3-hour World War II movie about a physicist was the most urgent thing they'd ever seen. Christopher Nolan doesn't just make movies, he obsesses over them. And the films that shaped him, the ones he keeps coming back to, the ones he tells other filmmakers to drop everything and watch right now, those are the movies we're talking about today. Some of these will surprise you. Some of them will make you feel genuinely embarrassed you haven't seen them yet. All of them are worth your time. Hi, my name is Jeffrey, and this is Old School Movies, where we dig into the films that actually matter, the ones that changed how cinema works and the ones that somehow got buried along the way. It's number 1, 2001, A Space Odyssey, 1968. Kubrick's 1968 masterpiece is the starting point for any serious conversation about cinematic ambition, and Nolan has never been shy about that. The gold standard for using visuals to tell a story without explaining everything to the audience. No hand-holding, no spoon-feeding, just images and sound and something enormous happening just beyond your understanding. The boned spaceship cut alone is worth a film school semester. Nolan cited this directly when discussing how Interstellar approached its more abstract sequences. Once you know that you genuinely cannot unsee it. Kubrick appears 3 times on this list, by the way. You'll see why.
How do you mean?
Number 2, Lawrence of Arabia, 1962. David Lean spent 3 years making Lawrence of Arabia, and Nolan has called it one of the greatest achievements in the history of the medium. What Nolan took from this film specifically is that scale is a language. The desert isn't just a backdrop, it's a character. It breathes, it threatens, it swallows people whole. Nolan brought that exact philosophy to Dunkirk, letting the ocean and the sky do the emotional heavy lifting while the characters barely speak. Peter O'Toole was 29 when he filmed this. 29 years old. Let that sink in for just a moment.
Filmed against a canvas of awesome magnificence.
Number 3, The Conversation, 1974. Francis Ford Coppola made The Godfather, then The Godfather Part 2, and then sandwiched between those two giants he made The Conversation in 1974, or a paranoid claustrophobic thriller about a surveillance expert who starts unraveling his own mind. Nolan has pointed to this film when discussing the architecture of suspense, specifically how you build dread, not through action, but through information the audience has that the character doesn't. Gene Hackman gives one of the greatest performances ever committed to film here, and almost nobody talks about it anymore, which is a genuine crime against cinema. Go fix that this weekend.
No, we're responsible. I'm not responsible.
Number 4, Duel, 1971. Before Steven Spielberg was Spielberg, he made a movie for television in 1971 about a businessman being hunted down a California highway by a truck. Just a truck. You never see the driver. That's the whole movie. Nolan has talked about Duel as a masterclass in pure filmmaking instinct. If they the kind of visceral tension you can only pull off when you completely trust your camera. Spielberg was 24 when he directed this, which is genuinely annoying if you think about it too long. The film later got a theatrical release in Europe, and it holds up better than half the big-budget thrillers made in the last decade. 40 minutes in, and you will genuinely be nervous about a truck. Number 5, The Battle of Algiers, 1966. Yellow Pont de Corbeau's 1966 film about the Algerian fight for independence from France is one of those movies that makes you feel slightly guilty for not having seen it sooner. It was shot to look like a documentary, but it isn't one. Every frame is controlled, every scene engineered for maximum impact. Jan Nolan has mentioned this film when discussing how you create a sense of historical reality on screen, and it directly influenced Dunkirk's stripped-down, almost journalistic approach to warfare. The Battle of Algiers was actually banned in France for 5 years after its release. You can probably guess why. Some films make governments uncomfortable. This one made an entire government furious.
La base de ce travail est le renseignement. La méthode.
Number 6. A Matter of Life and Death, 1946. Powell and Pressburger made this in 1946, and it might be the most visually inventive British film ever made. A Royal Air Force pilot survives a crash he was supposed to die in, and then has to argue for his right to live before a celestial court. That's the plot. And somehow, it works completely. Nolan has called this one of his all-time favorites, and you can feel its DNA in everything from The Prestige to Interstellar. Heaven is shot in black and white. Earth is in color. Think about that for a second. Someone made that decision in 1946. It was absolutely the right call.
Squadron leader Peter Carter. No, I'm not going to land. Undercarriage is gone.
Number 7. The Wages of Fear, 1953. Henri-Georges Clouzot made this French thriller in 1953, and Nolan has called it one of the most purely suspenseful films he's ever seen. The setup is brutal in its simplicity. Two men have to drive a truck loaded with unstable nitroglycerin across miles of wrecked mountain roads in South America. That's it. No villains, no romance subplot, no third act twist. Just two guys in a truck and the very real possibility that everything ends in a fireball. At least Hitchcock supposedly tried to buy the rights before the film even came out. Clouzot beat him to it. The opening 40 minutes are slow and deliberate, and then the movie absolutely does not let go. Not for a single second.
Tu crois pas qu'on fait une connerie maison?
Number 8. Zulu, 1964. 1964. 4,000 Zulu warriors against just over 100 British soldiers at Rorke's Drift in South Africa. Michael Caine's first major film role. Nolan has pointed to Zulu as a film that understood something most war movies still haven't figured out. You don't need to take a side to make an audience feel the stakes. The Zulu warriors are portrayed with genuine dignity, and that was radical for a British war film in '64. The battle sequences influenced Dunkirk directly. Nolan has worked with Caine in every film since Batman Begins. That admiration clearly runs both ways.
It's a day and night of death and defiance, when 100 gallant men...
Number 9. The Thin Red Line, 1998. Scorsese ranked it number 2 on his list of the greatest films of the 90s. It came out 2 months after Saving Private Ryan and got crushed at the box office. And Terrence Malick disappeared for 20 years before making it, and then somehow disappeared again right after. Classic Malick. Nolan has cited the thin red line when talking about how cinema can use nature as an emotional counterpoint to violence. The jungle isn't just scenery. It's asking a question the soldiers can't answer. The studio expected a blockbuster and got a poem instead. A gorgeous, devastating poem about what war actually costs.
Make no difference who you are, no matter how much training you got.
But at number 10, Playtime, in 1967. Jacques Tati spent 3 years and his entire personal fortune making Playtime in 1967, and it nearly destroyed him. He lost everything. Nolan has talked about this film with what can only be described as reverence, calling it one of the most ambitious things ever attempted in cinema. The whole movie was shot on a massive custom-built set in Paris, essentially an entire city constructed just to demolish the idea of modern architecture. The comedy is quiet and layered. Sometimes you don't catch the joke until 30 seconds later. Nolan cited this specifically when discussing the design philosophy behind Inception. Once you know that, everything looks different. Number 11. Spartacus, 1960. Stanley Kubrick, again, of course. Nolan has mentioned Spartacus in the context of large-scale production design, and how you make an epic feel genuinely massive without losing the human story buried inside it. Kirk Douglas starred in and produced this in 1960 and fought personally to give blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo his credit back after years of Hollywood cowardice during the McCarthy era. That took real courage in 1960. Kubrick later disowned the film because he didn't have final cut. Didn't matter. The I Am Spartacus scene remains one of the most emotionally effective moments in cinema history. It gets you every single time.
Unequaled in the entire history of filming.
Number 12. The Parallax View, 1974. Alan Pakula made 3 paranoia thrillers in the 70s, and The Parallax View is the darkest of the 3. Warren Beatty plays a journalist investigating a political assassination, And the deeper he digs, the more the film convinces you that the system is simply too large to fight. Nolan has cited Pakula's work when discussing how you build institutional dread. That feeling that the conspiracy isn't some shadowy group in a basement, but baked into the very structure of how things work. The brainwashing sequence is one of the most unsettling things you will ever sit through. It has no business being that disturbing. And yet. Number 13, Once Upon a Time in the West, 1968. Sergio Leone's 1968 masterpiece. The one Tarantino said literally made him want to be a filmmaker. Nolan has called it one of the finest examples of widescreen composition in cinema history. Almost 3 hours long, multiple false endings, and a final showdown between Henry Fonda and Charles Bronson that takes 15 full minutes. 15 minutes. Leone understood that the anticipation of an event can be more powerful than the event itself. That philosophy runs directly through Nolan's work from Inception to Dunkirk. Also, Ennio Morricone's score is so good it should probably be classified as a controlled substance. Seriously. Number 14, Heat, 1995. Michael Mann made Heat in 1995, and nobody was ready for it, including the audience apparently, who took about a decade to fully catch up. Nolan has referenced it specifically when discussing procedural realism, the idea that you show the work. Al Pacino and Robert De Niro share the screen for the first time in that coffee shop scene. 8 minutes, almost nothing happens, completely gripping. The downtown Los Angeles bank robbery shootout remains one of the most technically accurate gunfight sequences ever filmed. Real military advisors, real tactical movements, real consequences. Mann wasn't making an action movie, he was making a document.
Sit there, don't move, let it bleed.
Number 15, Blade Runner, 1982. Ridley Scott's 1982 film was a commercial disappointment and is now considered one of the most influential science fiction films ever made. Nolan has talked about Blade Runner in the context of production design and how a film's visual world can carry philosophical weight independent of the dialogue or the plot. The question it asks about what makes someone human is embedded in every single frame, in the rain and the neon, and the cramped, decaying grandeur of that future Los Angeles. Barbara Harrison Ford has said his character was human the whole time. Ridley Scott has repeatedly disagreed. 40 years later, that argument is still going. Number 16, Apocalypse Now, 1979. Francis Ford Coppola again. The man clearly knew what he was doing. To Apocalypse. Now took 3 years to finish, nearly killed its director emotionally and financially, and came out in 1979 as one of the most overwhelming cinematic experiences ever put on screen. Nolan has talked about this film in the context of how you sustain dread across a very long runtime, how you keep an audience in a state of mounting unease without ever letting them fully understand what they're afraid of. Marlon Brando was paid $3 million for 3 weeks of work and memorized none of his lines. Somehow that's perfect. Number 17, Dr. Strangelove, 1960. Kubrick a third time. At this point, it would be more surprising if he wasn't on this list. Dr. Strangelove came out in 1964 and remains the finest political satire ever made about nuclear annihilation, which is a very specific category, but still. Nolan has cited Kubrick's ability to use dark comedy as a delivery mechanism for genuine horror, and you can feel that influence in his own work. Peter Sellers plays 3 completely distinct roles. 3. The War Room set alone, designed by Ken Adam, is one of the greatest pieces of production design in cinema history. Full stop. Number 18, Le Samouraï, 1967. Jean-Pierre Melville made this French crime film in 1967, and it is possibly the coolest movie ever made. That is not hyperbole. Alain Delon plays a contract killer who operates with such methodical precision that the film itself starts to feel like a machine. Nolan has pointed to Le Samouraï when discussing how you build character through behavior rather than dialogue, how you let what a person does in a room alone tell you everything you need to know about them. DeLong speaks maybe 200 words total across the entire film. It doesn't matter. You understand exactly who this man is from frame 1. Number 19. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, 1966. Leone again. This one deserves its own entry because Nolan has specifically called it out separately when discussing editing rhythm and how you build tension through intercutting. The final three-way standoff in the cemetery runs for nearly 10 minutes and involves almost no movement whatsoever. It is pure cinema. Ennio Morricone's score does things during that sequence that no composer has managed to replicate before or since. Tarantino has said this film made him want to become a director. Nolan has essentially said the same thing in different words. When two filmmakers of that caliber point at the same movie, you should probably pay attention. Number 20. Metropolis, 1927. Fritz Lang made Metropolis in 1927. 1927. Nolan has called it one of the foundational works of visual storytelling, full stop. The sets, the crowd choreography, the robot Maria sequence. Lang was doing things with camera and production design that filmmakers are still learning from nearly a century later. The original cut was thought lost for decades until 2008, when a nearly complete version was discovered in a Buenos Aires film archive. If you've only seen truncated versions, you owe it to yourself to find the restored cut. Every single minute earns its place. The fact that this film exists at all is honestly miraculous, so there you have it. 20 films that shaped one of the most technically obsessive directors working in cinema today. Some of these you've seen. Some you've been meaning to get to for years. A few you may have genuinely never heard of. And that is exactly why we're here. If you've seen everything on this list, leave a comment below. I genuinely want to know what kind of person you are. I'm Jeffrey. This is Old School Movies. See you in the next one.